Hello everybody, I hope you're having a great day. Well, we're kind of living in unusual times. People are practicing the social distancing, and so that makes it just a perfect time to learn how to bake and make biscuits. These particular biscuits are made with dry milk or powdered milk, and in this day sometimes it's not easy to get your hands on fresh milk or even butter, and so it's nice to know that there's alternative methods that can be used to produce wonderful biscuits. And so I wanted to share this video with you and show you how I make biscuits with dry milk. First, you start with half a cup of water. I have that in that cup, and I also have some dry buttermilk. I'm going to use that as well, and we're going to put a spoonful of that, about a tablespoon of dry buttermilk in, and then a tablespoon of dry milk. And if you don't have the dry buttermilk, just use 2 tablespoons of dry milk. And if you don't have dry milk, well, just go ahead and use milk, a half a cup of milk. And so it works either way. Next, we want 1 cup of flour. Now, this is self-rising flour, but you can use regular all-purpose flour. You just want to add 1½ teaspoons of baking powder to your flour. But this is self-rising flour. So we put a cup of self-rising flour in, and I'm going to also add 1/8 teaspoon of salt. And that's because I'm not going to be using salted butter. I'm going to be using shortening, and this is Crisco shortening. And so, like I said, if you don't have access to fresh butter or milk, this is an alternative way to make delicious biscuits. And so you take about 2 tablespoons of shortening and you put that in the bowl with the flour. Now we're going to work that together. And you can use a pastry cutter, and a lot of people prefer that, but I don't like the hassle of having to wash it. And to me, this is just as easy to work it with your hands. Just squeeze it together a little bit at a time, work that flour in and break that shortening up. It's not hard at all. You just do it by hand. And there's something kind of satisfying about doing homemade cooking, and I can't think of a better time to do it than when we're kind of isolated at home. And so go ahead and master this skill. You'll be glad you did. So we work it together like that. Simple. Okay, we'll turn the bowl, make sure we pull it from all the sides of the bottom. Just like that. Really simple. And then we'll make a well in the bottom to put the liquid in. So we'll go ahead and pour in that half a cup of liquid that's mixed with the dry milk. Okay? And we'll get something to stir with. And I like to use the round end of a spoon rather than the spoon end. It's just easier to clean once I'm done. And so we begin to gently stir the ingredients together. Now, I need to tell you something. I pulled the flour out of my storage closet and I had it vacuum sealed. And the vacuum sealing on my flour compressed it. And so when I took it out of the bag and put it in the flour bowl, or flour canister, it was so compressed I had to sift it. And because of that, it's lighter than the way it comes normally from the store. And so I have to add more flour because it was just too wet. If you noticed what that looked like as I'm mixing it, you want the flour, you want this dough to be as wet as you can work with it. So you want it where it's just barely not sticking on your fingers. It's right at that critical point. You have to be able to work it. And it's better to have a wetter dough, I think. It makes nicer biscuits. And so as I look at that, I can see it's still too wet to handle without it just getting all over and sticking to my hands. And so it's good to master this look technique, to master what it looks like to have it properly mixed rather than being just a slave to measurements. Although there's nothing wrong with that. But now I begin to move it in the bowl and trying to see if it's dry enough to work and to deal with, and it's still pretty wet in there. I can feel it sticking on my fingers. And so I'm going to add just enough, try to get a layer or a coating of flour so I can work with it out of the bowl. And I know that it's really wet, so I'm going to put a coating of flour there on the wax paper that I'm using to keep my board from getting wet. So now you can see I'm picking it up, and it's so wet that it pulls and it comes apart really easy. I'm going to go ahead and roll this out, turn this out on the board. And now we just begin gently pressing. And of course, the key to good biscuits is gentleness. The way to ruin them is to overwork the dough. And that's the secret to good biscuits. And so it has a coating of flour, and as long as I don't break through that coating, I can work it. And I'm going to use the wax paper to turn it. You can see how it's sticking in spots on the wax paper. Turn it 1/3, then turn it the other third over, and it kind of looks like a big burrito. Gently working it and pushing it. Notice how gentle it is, the actions that I'm using. And I want to keep this just dry enough that it doesn't stick, but I want it as wet as possible. So it's that spot that I'm looking for. We'll turn this over again and make sure it's not sticking underneath. It's very, very moist, very wet. And then I'm going to kind of fold that in half again. And you could fold it in half lengthways. And I thought about doing that, but I'm going to make these biscuits not quite as thick as I normally do. So I'm not going to fold it in half lengthways. All right, so we just gently folded it together. It has dry areas where the flour is on the surface, and then it has wet areas in between those dry areas, and we want to try and keep that. Now I measure with my biscuit cutter, and I'm going to press this out where it's wide enough that I can make the cuts for these biscuits, and then straight down. Give it just the least little shake because it's so wet. These are wetter than usual. And you'll notice how it kind of sticks to my fingers if I touch an area that doesn't have the flour coating. You see how that sticks to my thumb? It's very, very wet. There, I have to push that back in. But these biscuits have layers of dry flour and then the very wet dough. And so now we're going to pull these pieces together, and they are still so wet that it comes together really easy. And I want you to notice how I'm not really kneading this at all. You don't want to knead it. I'm turning it a little and pushing it, barely pushing it together. And it's starting to stick. And then I'm going to fold it, trying to get a smooth top. And then we'll go ahead and cut out another biscuit. Very little handling of the dough, or as little as possible. That's 4. We'll get one more, and you'll see these pieces. We still want to do it the very same way. Try not to work it any more than necessary. Just barely pressing it and folding it together. That's how you get layers in your biscuits. And now we want to just kind of fold it and make it just big enough to cut out one more biscuit. Here we go. Just like that, with very little left over. And so we have a row of 3 and a row of 2 for 5 biscuits. 2 for my wife and 3 for me. Just right. Biscuits for 2. And into an oven that's preheated to 425 degrees for 12 minutes. And then out they come. Beautiful biscuits made with powdered milk and Crisco shortening, or any kind of shortening you happen to have. Beautiful. Nice and light and flaky and moist. I don't like a dry biscuit. You can see how they've expanded, and they almost show you where they want to come apart. Just a little bit of encouragement and they come right apart. Wonderful biscuits. I'm going to go ahead and put some butter on there. I have some butter, but I was using it for this wonderful moment to add the flavor in to these nice hot biscuits. Oh yeah, nice and tender and soft, and really great biscuits. And then I have some homemade apple peel jelly. Apple peels make great jelly, and it's easy to make. Anyway, I don't have a video on that, but it's really delicious. So I'm going to add that to these biscuits. I hope that you're being safe, and wherever you are, that your family is safe. I want to encourage you to follow all the guidelines that your community has set for you and your state, the federal authorities, wherever you live. Now for a taste. Oh, that's so good. Gotta tell you. Homemade dry milk biscuits. So let me kind of tear this apart and so you can see the texture I'm talking about. Very tender. Let me have that. I don't know if you can tell that these are just wonderful biscuits. They turned out excellent. And you can make these too. They're very easy to make. If you don't have any dry milk, I encourage you to have some in your storage. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye now.